Uh, hey, welcome back to the Nerdrotic Podcast. My name is Gary Buechler. I am live in San Francisco, California, and I come to you from nerdrotic.com. And down in San Diego is my good friend, and I'm not quite sure, I think he's a mutant, Dennis Bithoulkas. What is up?
I am a mutant. Not like Ozzy Osbourne.
Mutie.
Ozzy Osbourne, he's really freaking a mutant, but I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. We are here to cover the amazing Legion Season 2, Episode 2, Chapter 10. And thank you for just calling your episodes chapters and not some crazy name like we had to deal with Star Trek Discovery. I am grateful to Noah Hawley for many things. We were just talking, we had about a 19-hour pre-production meeting before we started here. And I kind of said that Noah Hawley is probably the god of comic book television right now. He is. Legion, Dennis, I think is the most comic book of comic book shows.
I agree.
In a very adult, intelligent, and surreal way. This is what comic books are. This is why it's the perfect medium for me. Anyway, you can get this weird, and somehow he has captured it. I'm not sure how. I mean, just pure talent. I could never do what this guy is pulling off.
No. I mean, I couldn't either. There's just, I mean, you even look in the background of some stuff, and we're going to talk about some stuff that was in the background here later on in the episode that I caught that I was like, what the hell is that? And then I was looking at him like, that actually makes sense from a comic book point of view.
Nice. And that's why we have, that's why Dennis is here. Besides, he's the only one who would podcast with me regularly. He's also the Mr. Attention to Detail. And that is, hello, everybody in the chat.
Yeah. Hey, everybody.
We will be getting to you shortly. If this is the first time you're watching our podcast, welcome. Please subscribe if you like our stuff. And we always do stuff live, visceral, and interactive. So let's check out Legion episode 2, and we get to the chat when we're done with our recap. So, let's get going, man. It starts out with David, Lenny, and Oliver on a merry-go-round.
With Lenny, licking one of those gigantic, oversized lollipops, which is what it started off with, that whole spinning wheel. I was wondering, like, what are they trying to do here? And then they pull back out, and it's her licking that lollipop.
And that was just dirty. I'm sorry, but Aubrey Plaza really likes lollipops. We'll just say
she does.
She does. We love Aubrey Plaza.
She was enjoying it quite a bit.
Yes.
So was I. But that's a different story.
Awkward. Definitely awkward. So yes. And David was talking about a distraction, and so they're meeting. I don't know if it's the astral plane where they're meeting, or in each other's minds. I'm not really sure at this point.
Yeah, I don't know either, because there's something interesting that happens later on, which we'll get to, which really kind of throws, my mind for a loop as to where they are, or where everything is happening. So this is what really kind of throws me off here. But yeah, David basically says he's going to help the Shadow King find his body. And basically no one gets killed. No one gets hurt. And they agree to that. And that's when Oliver disappears into this field with a fortune teller stand. And we see a fortune teller with a crystal ball, and he's talking to him, and he says, he's agreed, we go tonight. And it was just kind of a weird thing. We're like, okay, where is this going?
And he's talking to himself.
Yeah.
Then we get even like, again, the attention to detail, the credits for this show. So it's different, everyone. And you just go into the crystal ball and the credits show up Legion. And like, that is what's comic book about it. Like, you always get your titles, like it used to say Stanley Presents, and it's always like on the side of a building or something, or dripping in blood. And then it says the name. Yeah, or in a crystal ball, which I'm sure they've done in the comics. Can't remember for sure, but I'm sure they've done. And we get our credit scene, and more so this season than with last season. I am not entirely sure like what's real, if any of this is real, if this is all in David's head. Remember, last time we saw David, he got snapped up in an orb and flew away. And then they found him in a club. So these places he's meeting, David is meeting with Lenny and Oliver, they actually exist. Well, at least we think so in the world. Like that club they were meeting in the first episode, I thought that was just the astral plane or somebody's mind, but no, that was a club that existed. And so is this little fortune teller stand. So we think.
Yeah. And then we cut to trucks going across the plains, if you will. And Vermilion, David, Sid, and Patonomy are all in the back of the truck, and they're talking about Vermilion and how it's kind of creepy. You know, they don't know if they're synthetic or not, and it's just a very odd, scene where they're talking about Vermilion, and just the three of them are like, "Can they hear us?" And I don't think so. I'm not getting anything. I can't read their minds or anything like that. So it's just very weird.
And that's why Patonomy likes them, because they're data. So he doesn't get that noise from the memory. He mentions that they're androids, but they mentioned, Vermilion mentioned in the first episode that they were a boy at some point.
Yeah, that they were actually alive, and they had the machinery stuffed into them, basically, poured into them, if you will.
Yeah, so I think they're mutants. I'm just saying. I think they're mutants.
So we end up out in the field there. They see the fortune teller stand and Sid sees a music box, and she opens it up, and it's playing Swing on a Star.
Yep.
And Sid flashes back to a memory when she was a child, and David's like, what is that? He goes, she says it's nothing. It's from my childhood. That's all she mentions. And this is when we go over to Oliver and Lenny. They're actually back at Division 3, and they are obliterating pretty much everyone that they're finding as they're singing Swinging on a Star, kind of like Hudson Hawk.
Yes.
It's kind of weird that it comes up to that. There's a couple things that we talked about.
That was not an accident, by the way. That was straight up a nod to Hudson Hawk, by the way.
There's a few things that happened in this episode that we've talked about recently in our podcast, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit. I'm like, are they listening to us? What's going on?
No, Dennis. Reality is it's a decision that you make, right? It's perception. You decide what reality is. That's part of the delusion. That's part of the delusion of what is maybe reality. Are you the butterfly or the monk or whatever the hell that was?
Exactly.
And by the way, we did talk about this on the other podcast, but not on the proper Legion one. Thank you to a commenter who pointed out, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but I will give you props again next episode for correcting us with, because we didn't know who the narrator was, but it was John Hamm, which makes a lot of sense because John Hamm was one of the 5 people Fox had announced to play Mr. Sinister and is not going to now in the New Mutants. But real quick, John Hamm has got a superhero face. He's got to be in some kind of superhero something sooner or later. So.
Yeah. Because he's going to be. I know his next movie isn't a superhero movie. It's actually a drama, if you will. It's called Beirut, and it's getting good reviews at the moment. So
yeah. Well, I would definitely pick him to be in Irredeemable. I talked about that a lot on my live stream, which you and I are gonna talk about some more on Friday. But let's get back to Legion.
Yeah. So Oliver's going through and basically just obliterating these guards. He's turning them into dust. And at one point in Swinging on the Star, it says, or would you rather be a pig? And they turn one of them into a pig. And then would you rather be a fish? And she turns one of them into a fish. It's just very, very messed up.
It's really messed up.
Yeah. And we see Oliver roaming through Division 3, and he runs into Carrie, who comes out, and he tries to appeal to Oliver. He goes, "Do you hear me?" And that's when Oliver reaches into his mind and says, "Do you hear me?" And he kind of drops his cup, and Carrie, the other Carrie, comes out and says, "Come on, let's go." And that's when a hand comes up out of the floor and grabs Carrie Loudermilk and drags him through the floor. And he says, "I'm scared." And he gets dragged through the floor into his room. Very, very surreal. This whole episode was very surreal, more so than the first one.
Yeah, and while Oliver's walking around in the office, Melanie is just laying down wasted, right? and
Exactly.
and it's creepy when he's walking through. And this is we got to get to this big Easter egg here. I'm sure many of you caught this.
Yeah.
Before Oliver walks in on Carrie, he's working on the orb device, and the first thing he says, and he's talking to Carrie in his body, he says, well, it's definitely not Shi'ar, but I can't help but think it's one of mine. I can't help
Yeah.
think. And I heard Shi'ar and I screamed. I did a nerd scream. Got my kids' attention. So I got really excited about that. I don't, not the biggest X-Men fan in the world. I haven't read a ton of stuff, but the Shi'ar Empire stuff, I dug. That's my favorite thing. I know it's the weirdest thing to like about the X-Men, but so to hear that was so cool. Was so cool.
Well, they are coming into the new movie that's supposed to be coming out. The new
Yes,
X-Men
they are.
movie.
Yes, they are. So
it's
I'm
gonna
sure
be
that's
awesome.
why they dropped it. But
Oh yeah.
that was cool. I liked it.
No, definitely. And so so we have Carrie getting ready to fight Oliver, and we have the other Carrie down in his room who meets Lenny, and he just has a spoon in his hand to fight her off. And she does this weird warping kind of thing where everything kind of vibrates, but she kind of leaves him alone. It's very odd. And Oliver freezes the other Carrie and leaves her alone. Doesn't do anything to her, just kind of stands over her. Almost, I thought he was shrinking her at one point because she looked like she was getting smaller. And
Well, he was growing. Like he grew. Yeah. So, his I was not totally familiar with the Shadow King's power in the comic books, but he's able to shape reality. Now he's more of not a parasite, but he's relying on somebody else's body right now. So this is why we have the whole David situation, which we'll get to. I think they really foreshadowed where they're going in this episode, like with this entire series. And we'll get to that at the end. But how like David is still just a novice compared to the Shadow King.
Yeah. And then we have David, Sid, and Ptonomy. They show up and they find Carrie. And those two try to merge, and Oliver and Lenny have left at this point. And both the Carries try to merge together, and they're having a little problem merging. And they kind of turn out inside out, because normally she goes into him, not vice versa, but he goes into her, and his arm is left sticking out of her stomach, and we can still hear him.
Yes.
Very creepy.
That was a really creepy scene with his arm sticking out. Yeah.
And then we notice that Melanie is still under the spell. She's still high off the elephant, but she kind of gleans enough together where she knows that Oliver was in the room with her.
Mm-hmm.
And she ends up going to General Fukuyama and the Vermilion, along with David and Sid, and says, okay, he's looking for a monk. He's looking for one of the Miko monks. And this Miko monk has Farouk's body. Basically, when he got defeated, they don't mention who he got defeated by, of course.
They're saving that.
They're saving that, exactly. That his body got spirited away by these Miko monks, and they're basically hiding it from him. And that's what he's looking for.
And we've seen the Miko monk.
Yes, we have.
We have.
So supposedly the Miko monk is at Division 3 someplace.
Yes.
They just don't know where. So that's what they're going to try and find. And then Vermilion basically says that sorry.
The Vermilion has been saying you have a 63% chance you've been lying to us. So they're completely on to David. And David's all, what are you talking about? I'm not lying at all. Dennis is gonna have to go take care of that. This is live podcasting, by the way. So they're on to David completely. And that's when Sid's trying to back him a little bit, and she's like, come on, he's trying to help you. And that's where Melanie comes in and says, listen, you don't want to piss off the only guy who can kill the monster. So we get this awesome transition scene too inside the basket of the Admiral that kind of shows everything that's going on, that was really, really cool. So David is going to talk. He goes and talks to Carrie, who's in a bit of a situation right now because she's got this hand sticking out of her stomach. But David wants to amp up the signal because he's feeling really bad, because when he went back, he saw all the dust on the ground, and he put his hand against the wall and he saw all the deaths of the soldiers. And we also didn't mention that the kids came up to the Shadow King, and the Shadow King was actually merciful with them and told them to just run. Which tells you there's something a little different about the Shadow King this season, because I kind of get the feeling last season's Shadow King would have just dusted the kids. So there might really actually be a bigger bad out there. Okay. And so he goes to Carrie, who's laying down, and she's got an arm through her. And he's like, I need to amp my signal a little bit because I want to go, I need to see if I can see things in the future or in the past, at multi-dimensional perception is what Carrie says. And then the other Carrie says within Carrie, you might want to not do that because you could explode. And David's like, I'll take that chance,
Yeah, because he wants to see beyond space and time.
Yes. And he wants to contact Sid. In particular, he wants to contact Sid.
And a lot of us have seen him through space and time sometimes. It just depends on, what you've done.
Yeah. Oh, I have.
Oh, I know you have.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah. So David ends up in the tank again, and we see Carrie is actually talking to Carrie inside of her because she doesn't know what buttons to push, what to plug into, and of course shocks David a couple times.
Yeah.
David starts tripping out. We start seeing his head kind of, getting stretched out, and he's like, more. And that's when she ends up like really hitting it there, turning the dial. And he wakes up in a weird room.
Yeah, like a weird purple room full of jump cuts. It's kind of like you're watching YouTube videos with a bunch of jump cuts going on. And that was cool, by the way. That whole, how they showed that like David was, and he was physically there. So he popped through to the future. Yeah. But you can tell the connection isn't good, right? So Sid comes in, and Sid's missing something that I didn't know she was missing the first episode.
Yeah, I think this is I think another alternate version of Sid, because the one that we saw initially, who told him to help the Shadow King, wasn't missing the arm.
Are you sure? Because she was using her left hand to use the wand. So I'm not entirely sure why she's missing her arm, but we got tons of information on this one. Whether for one, David didn't ask two really important questions. That gets brought up later, but I'm going to bring it up now. He doesn't ask her when she is and what the hell happened to her arm. Okay. All I know is when my wife like changes her hair or something like that, if I don't notice it within say 5 minutes, I'm on the couch. So like if the person I love is missing an arm, that's kind of something you ask about. I'm just saying, come on, David.
Yeah, it was very weird that that's when we start seeing kind of what Melanie was talking about, was that, these guys with the powers, and they go off to go and fight the big bad, that they're more engrossed in fighting the big bad than actually living life.
Mm-hmm.
And paying attention to the smaller details in life.
Yeah. And well, within that, Sid and David are talking, and he's like, I've got to know why I'm going to help Farouk. Why? I mean, like he just killed some people, so I need to know why. She kind of tells him. She said, "There's things out there that are, he might kill a few, but the thing we're after kills everything." And he asks where Farouk is, and she says, "You killed him last week. You bashed his brains in."
Yeah.
And she's also very surprised to see him in his current state. I thought I would never see you like this again.
Yeah, she says the kind version.
Yes. So I'm already thinking like we might see like the comic book Legion with the crazy hair and everything. That's a possibility. Because remember, kids, this is a villain origin story.
Yep.
Villain origin story.
Because there's something that someone else says later on here that we're going to get to. Well, we're going to get to it here fairly quickly. So basically, delusion, that's what I'm calling it. Delusion is what has killed everyone, because she says it started as an idea.
It started, and it might be delusion. I think it's we'll get to that, because I think it's I'll get to that at the end.
Okay.
I think delusion has something to do with it, but
Yeah.
I think it's a thing. It's a person. It's a
Oh, I
person.
think it's a person as well,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think
Yeah.
delusion is just the weapon.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and then Sid says, David says, well, I'm glad I could, come here, and come to the future or come and meet you. And would you like me to do this again? She goes, what do you mean? You brought me here.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting,
Yeah.
but it's true. I
Yeah.
didn't think of it that way, but like, yeah, he brought her there.
And so he asks her, would you like to meet again like this? He says, he's trying to ask her in a way that so that he doesn't just bring her, but that he actually gets her consent instead of just taking her wherever she's from and bringing her to him. And she doesn't really answer.
She kind of nods, maybe. I don't know. I didn't
Yeah.
catch anything. I wasn't sure about that, to be honest with you. Then we cut to commercial, and then we come back with Mr. John Hamm again.
Yeah, with about ticks and dogs and humans, and how ticks and dogs don't perceive the universe, don't ask these questions because they're not cognizant of what is around them, but humans do, and that's the reason why humans can go mad.
Yes.
Which is totally untrue because it's been proven that other animals can go mad as
Yeah,
well.
I even wrote that down in my notes,
I
Dennis.
did too.
He
Yeah.
said that human beings are the only species that go mad, and it's like, no, actually, apes and monkeys do too, and
Dogs,
dogs.
cats.
Oh my God, yeah. Have you ever had two dogs that live together forever, and then one of the dogs dies?
Yep.
Yeah, you don't tell me that bullshit. Anyway, but yeah, it works for the story, so that's cool. Oh,
Yeah.
and then they talk. This is great. Okay, so they talk about reality and stuff, and how if you
Mhm.
taught a kid wrong, and it made me think of that great Steve Martin, like from his first album, Wild and Crazy Guy. Don't you remember? It's when he's all,
I did hear. I listened to it, but I don't remember which
every
one you're
time you
talking
get
about.
around a kid, talk wrong. So on his first day of school, he raises his hand and says, "Yay, Mamu dog face to the banana patch." You never heard that? Come on. When he's
I
asking to go to the
have.
bathroom.
It's been.
That's classic Steve Martin. That was a
It's
nod
old.
to that. Yes.
Yeah. I
Uh, that was a funny scene though, because he's teaching him like all the wrong colors.
yeah.
Oliver's teaching him, and then the kid crosses the street and gets hit, and he just writes his notes. He's all,
Yeah. That red is green and green is red,
yeah.
and then then he teaches them. Yeah. Well, you know, green means go, red means stop, which of course is different than that kid's head. They're really messed up. So Clark and David end up meeting up, and they end up talking. And I love this is the other exchange too, where David says, "You were the villain," and Clark says, "No, you were. You're the villain." At this point, your camera's not in focus there, buddy.
Okay.
Sorry.
You're talking, so it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to make sure there. So and David Clark asked David if he found Farouk, and the interesting thing was that we found out is that Farouk likes to hide in other people's minds, so he wears them. He wears their personas within his mind. That's how he hides. And I was like, that's kind of interesting how he does that.
That is, and that's a big reveal, because that means technically they're still alive.
Yeah.
In a very bizarre and disgusting form, but they're still alive. That was a huge reveal.
Yeah. And that actually gets into something else that we're going to go to as well. And then Clark and David start talking via telepathy.
Yes.
Which I found kind of weird. That whole thing about, I'm suspicious of you. And he goes, well, you're suspicious of everyone. That's your job.
Yep.
You're supposed to be suspicious
You're
of
just
everyone.
doing your job.
Yeah. And so it was a good little exchange. I'm kind of liking little bits of Clark being, added into this. It's almost kind of like he's the reality portion and everyone else is not.
No, I'm absolutely loving his character. Like, he's becoming one of my favorite. As long as it's small bits right now, but he's good.
Yeah.
Because they're flipping the script with him. Like, he straight up looks like a villain, like Mr. Glass. He's got a cane, he's got a melted face, and he works for Division 3. But is he the bad guy?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. To be honest with you, I think he's got a job to do. He's got to take care of his daughter.
Yeah,
And plus his husband is a higher up in Division 3.
exactly.
Yeah, so he's out there somewhere. They haven't shown him yet.
Yeah, they haven't brought him back. That's kind of
Yeah.
weird. So David ends up going back to his room, and we see a trail of black ooze on the floor leading into David's room.
Yes, and that was really the only visual reference to the delusion that we saw. We saw that a bunch the first episode, like 3 times, 3 times at least.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I caught that too. Right before he's going to go in, like, and set the record straight with the Shadow King. He's like, "Listen, I'm going to talk to him, and I'm going to be strong." And he goes in and with some confidence, which is kind of cool. We don't see that a lot from David a lot.
Yeah, and I also like that how he talks. He calls him Oliver Farouk.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So he goes in and we get to see Farouk, the real Farouk, for the first time.
The real Farouk shows up. David wakes up in a field. He finds the fortune teller stand, and they end up talking a little bit about what's reality, and also that David doesn't really, recognize how much power he actually has, and that he can actually shape reality. He just needs to flex his muscle, his brain a little bit more, as he says. You need to stretch your brain a little bit. And Farouk and David end up going into a wrestling match where they're dressed up as wrestlers, quite literally wrestling with their minds.
This is after a great scene where when Farouk is first talking to him, he starts out in French, and then he gets to English. He starts using slang with an English accent, then flips it back and forth between French, which was kind of cool. It was a little,
I think Egyptian as well.
I don't know. I was reading it half the time, so
Yeah.
That was really cool. But that laying that out, that we are gods, like we are bigger than, like, how does John Lennon say it? We are bigger than Jesus.
Yeah.
And the Shadow King's kind of nothing on Legion. Just, it's no spoiler. They've said this in the first season. He is the most powerful mutant. He's a lot like the Sentry. If you guys are in the Marvel comics, if you're in the Sentry was kind of Marvel Comics Superman, and he was his own bad guy because he was so powerful. That's what Legion is. He's too powerful to actually write a good, like, linear story on. But that's why this is a perfect show.
Yeah. And so they get back to that wrestling match, and this is where Farouk basically says, "You're fighting the wrong fight." And we see him as we pan behind David. He ends up with a samurai sword, and he pulls a samurai sword. And then we pass behind Farouk, and David ends up in a tank.
Yep.
And just before he shoots, Farouk turns into smoke, and the tank shoots. And then they both the smoke swirls around, and they end up wrestling each other again. And that's where Farouk ends up, telling him, David says, "You got to agree. Don't hurt anyone else, and I will, help you find your body." And Farouk's like, "I don't know about this." He's still on the fence about it, and he ends up snapping his fingers in front of David's face because they're back at the teller stand again. And again, this is like a classic comic book. I mean, you're bouncing around all over the place. We're going through different frames. And again, how Noah Hawley does this, I don't know how you could even,
with the tank and the smoke. I mean, that's where it hit me. Like, this is so freaking perfectly comic book right now.
Yeah, especially the above shot.
Yeah, they did it. They start out. Yeah, they pan behind Farouk. He turns into a tank. Then it shoots. You're shooting from above, and the tank is firing into the smoke swirling around. I'm like, Christ, that looked awesome. That was so cool.
And it's just a circle. It's a perfectly lit circle. Everything else is black around it, like a comic book panel.
Yep. Damn, that was good.
Yeah, he knows exactly what he's doing. So basically, he ends up. Farouk ends up agreeing not to kill anybody.
Yeah, which is a bad promise. I even wrote it down in my notes as a bad promise because we've seen this in shows before, shows we cover, where he's not going to kill anybody, but he's going to remove somebody's arms and legs or something. Yeah. It's going to be worse than death.
Which I think that's how Sid's going to lose an arm, more or less.
Maybe I have a different theory on that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Go on.
So after David leaves, he's like, okay, I'll get in touch with you, and he leaves. Lenny appears in the field and says she wants to be freed. She wants a new body because she knows Farouk can do this. Farouk can shape reality or reshape reality, and she goes, "You can have Oliver. You've got Oliver here. I'll just slip out the back door." And this is where we get an interesting little.
Well, that was interesting because that was the first confirmation we've got that Lenny's alive. Otherwise, it's never come out and said it. We've always just assumed that maybe part of Lenny's persona is in there, but she's pretty freaking dead, and he's just using her face to trick David. But now it's confirmed that Lenny's alive,
and he's basically wearing her as a suit, if you will, her memory or her, her, I guess
her persona,
yeah,
because her body's gone. So,
and he goes, "What would you do with a new body?" And she goes, "I'd live the shit out of it." Then what? Die again is what she says. And then what?
And then what? And that was interesting.
Yeah.
But I loved how before he does that, he when he walks away from the fortune teller stand,
he
shows him wiping it away with his thumb like it was on a window, and then he unzips reality, and we're just in a white room. Man, this show's trippy.
Yeah, and that's why I was kind of getting to the point. I'm like, okay, where is this all taking place? Is this taking place in the astral plane? Is this taking place in someone's mind? Because then we come back. I skipped over here on my notes here. Carrie talking to Carrie, and they decide that they're going to separate. They need to find a way to separate. And Carrie's like, no, that's not going to work. That's just, she goes, no, I'm not embarrassed. I can do it. So she starts singing.
They're going to hear me.
Yeah, they're going to hear me. And she starts singing the Banana Splits song.
Yes, which we were just talking about the other day.
That's weird. That's why it was weird. I was just like, what the hell, man? Are they actually listening to us? What's going on? Da, 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 da,
Tra-la-la.
Yeah. Yeah. And that actually works. And Carrie splits from her. But we find out that Carrie has now white streaks in her hair.
Yes, and they are losing their mutant abilities.
Yeah.
And if the Shadow King has that kind of power, then I can see why Division 3 would be very interested in him.
Yeah, exactly.
And while I like that as a plot point, I do not want Legion to be about the government taking away mutant powers and coming after the mutant. I'm so done with that.
I don't think that's going to be.
Yeah. No, that's why I loved Legion. It was about like mutants fighting mutants. Yeah, there was a Division 3, but they they actually end up joining forces. So that was cool and different for pretty much 15 years of the same X-Men story. So
it ends up that Melanie is telling David about Oliver and Summerland and how everything came about. And he's not really listening because he's got other voices going on in his head. And then he comes to, back into what Melanie is saying about Summerland and how they set this up for people that were like them. And then she tells him, you know what? Your powers are an obstacle. And he's like, what? They're an obstacle. She goes, you need to just take Sid, go away from here, go live on a hill someplace, and just look at the clouds. She goes, live your life.
And great advice. Yeah, absolutely great advice. That like this, I mean, the how it should end guys would use this because it's absolutely. Don't worry about you know what? The world's always in danger. It'll be fine. Yeah, some people will die. People always die. But some people forget to live. It's kind of an on the nose line, but it's true. It's true. Why are you worried about all this shit? Like why is the weight of the world on your shoulders? Go love Sid and, be happy. She never had that choice. But this got me thinking about Legion, about our boy David, and the name of the show. And he's got these voices in his head, always talking to him. And on the surface, it looks like, oh, it's just, his mutant ability. It's so powerful that he just has, talks with himself and he can hear it. But his name is Legion. So David is so powerful that each one of his personas is individual power, we'll just say. So I'll leave it out with that,
Yeah.
But it's gonna get gnarly. It's gonna get gnarly.
So David goes to go talk to Sid, and he finds her up on the roof, crouched down with a dead pigeon, kind of batting around. And she goes, "Oh, I'm over here. I'm over," and she's in the cat again, which is a weird conversation. And David's like, I got to tell you something. He goes, I haven't told you. I haven't been entirely truthful with you. And he goes, well, you just switch back. This is really kind of annoying.
Yeah.
And so she switches back, and he tells her that she was the one that took him. And there's a future version of herself. And she goes, well, how old was I? He goes, I don't know, just older. Not old, but just older. And I don't know if you noticed in the background, all the buildings with pointing fingers.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. That's what, I don't know if those were balloons or what those things were. That's what started questioning about this reality. If this is actually happening in his head, if he's still stuck on the astral plane with Sid and everybody else. Because remember, that's what they were trying to do in the first season, is they went up into the astral plane.
Oh,
if everyone's still stuck there.
Maybe. I mean, Mr. Robot pulled off a whole thing where Elliot was in jail for half a season and we didn't know it. So
Yeah.
and that wasn't a super powered mind bending show, just a drug one. Yeah. So I agree. It could be that. But he tells Sid the truth, which is good because he's technically not lying, telling later
Her.
Sid. And then she asks all the right questions. She's like, how old was I? How'd I look?
Mhm.
Was it tomorrow? Was it next week? Am I old? He's all, you're older. Yeah. What, how do we know it's even Sid? Yeah, he's all, I'm not crazy. I know. So I have no idea entirely what's going on. I know there's armies of people on some other podcasts who do research. We do not. We watch the show. We talk about it. And then we get all the stuff we got wrong later.
Exactly.
It's all good.
And she goes, well, like you've always said, reality is a choice.
But I totally disagree with that. Again, it's not a choice.
Well, that was the whole thing that they were talking about too, about the tattoo on the back there with the all the words, saying how reality is a choice until you stop trying to believe in reality and realize that it still goes on.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting.
You can question it all you want, but the bills still need to get paid. Okay,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so we find out he's talking about that he needs to find the monk, and we see the bald dude that we had seen in the first episode here in chapter 9, down with all the teeth chatterers.
Yes.
And I don't know if you noticed his eyes were doing what the people's teeth were doing.
Oh yeah, because
jiggling back and forth.
Well, the Shadow King in the scenes for next week, they kind of spoil a little bit. So the teeth chattering, which I thought was related to Oliver and the Shadow King, is related to the monk. It's the monk. And that's either a protection of some kind or it's his mutant ability. I'm not entirely sure, but they kind of let that one go in the scenes for next week, where Farouk is all, watch out for that monk. He's a little bit contagious.
And that was where we left off on our episode.
Great episode, by the way.
Yeah, really good episode.
Great episode. I've watched the first episode 3 times now. I'm going to watch this one again probably after the podcast. And the rewatchability is almost necessary, but it's really good. It's so freaking entertaining. And let's get to the chat, Dennis. Let's hear what the people have to say.
Yeah. So Alexander Sandu says it's so funny how you can keep saying it's so comic book, and all I hear is it's so Lynch. Obviously, because it's my only point of reference when it comes to warped reality.
Yeah, Lynch is the go-to for a lot of people, but Lynch is not the definitive on alternate reality. I think Lynch is. Forgive me, Lynch fans. He's just weird. I think Gilliam is much better.
Yeah, Gilliam
reality, but making it watchable and fun. Lynch is entertaining, but you got to be in a mood to watch something by Lynch. But you can watch Time Bandits whenever the hell you want. And that's a bizarre movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's as close to kids movies you'll get from Terry Gilliam. So
Steve Betts says, that's what I was wondering. Doesn't Mercy seem like a complete 180 for the Shadow King compared to season 1? Wonder why. Wants to earn David's trust, or it could be Oliver exerting a little bit of control.
it could be, but I think it's more the Shadow King wants to get it wants its body back. It needs its body back. It even explained that towards the end of season 1. Like he was really sick of being in other bodies. He's like, I'm tired of this. Like, I want to get out. You think I like being in your fucking head? He wanted to take over David because he thought it would amp his power and get him probably back to his body quicker. I think they probably left that out in the writing of season 1 because they didn't know if they were going to get a season 2. To be honest with you. So yeah, Mercy was weird. That was definitely weird and very unlike the Shadow King.
Penn Farm Girl says, I thought Carrie's arm coming out of Carrie's chest was going to be the weirdest part of the show. Then I remembered what I was watching.
Yes. You're like, oh, it's just Legion.
It's just Legion. That's all. Alexander Sandu says she was missing the arm, talking about Sid. Looked like Mike from the Lodge.
Nice. Hey, Penn Farm Girl, I saw your early comment, and we will talk about Legends of Tomorrow on Friday. Because I'm gonna watch that finale too, because it's got Constantine.
So. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm not gonna say anything. It was good. That's all I'm gonna say. It made me laugh. Apple Crow says, I was wondering if they would do that. Would do the hair. Don't know how well it would work.
Yeah, you could do. I mean, I wouldn't do a literal version of it from the comic book. You can do it and make him look. I like just a flash, because what they're going to do, you're going to find out in the future. Okay, here's my theory. It's David killing everybody. So David's the villain. He's become the villain. He's the one who removed Sid's arm. She, probably tried to the very last minute to save him because she loves him. But now at the point she's just hiding and probably regretting waiting to the last moment. And they need Farouk's body. They need Farouk to try to stop him, which apparently didn't work. So I think he jumped in time maybe a little too far this episode, because Farouk was dead. So David's the villain in the future. I could be wrong on this, but I'm going to go with that right now. So David's the villain, and we might get a flash of crazy haired Legion just for a second. I think we might see Patrick Stewart. It feels like they're moving that way.
I hope so.
That would be cool, just for a second.
Yeah, you don't need it. You don't need to be a recurring character.
No. This show needs nothing.
Yeah,
it really does. It doesn't need other X-Men. I mean, just the mention of the Shi'ar. I mean, stuff like that is cool, and it makes it feel. And listen, Fox and all you people who make superhero stuff, that's all we really require. We like to know we're in this big, full world that we've been reading forever. We don't need every X-Men and every X-Men show. You can get obscure with the X-Men, and you could just mention things, and we're cool. We're all right,
Zev Bellringer says John Lennon was misquoted. He said the Beatles were bigger than Rod. He meant Rod Stewart.
Rod Stewart. No. I don't know if I thought they said bigger than John Lennon did say bigger in or we are bigger in Jesus, but he was just paraphrasing. He got the context was wrong, but I think he did say that.
Yeah,
he did say that.
Apple Crow says aside from the Shadow,
but they were not bigger than Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart is God.
He's king. Yes. Apple Crow says, aside from the Shadow King, are there any of those recurring characters from X-Men? Or are there any of these recurring characters from X-Men?
No. These are all original things. You're gonna see some side stuff, but no, this is all like Carrie Loudermilk is original creation. The Vermilion. I can't even say that. Vermilion. I don't think they've been in there, but Dennis and I are not the best people to ask about X-Men. We have a working knowledge of it, and I was able to sell X-Men comics at the store, but I did not read every single damn one because I was too busy. It's impossible to read like because I was into Spider-Man, so I read every Spider-Man title. You just can't keep up with both.
Yeah.
You got to
And
make a
also
decision.
the X-Men books take place in a different universe than the actual Marvel universe.
Nah, they don't. But Harry's not here. That doesn't bother me.
I know. Apple Crow says, because I'm still thinking all of this is in David's head, and each mutant is another one of his personalities. You may be on to something.
Yep.
That's all I'm going to say.
Yep. Think you're onto something. In Rod, we trust. It's got so many meetings. How's your father?
Yes, it does.
Yes, indeed.
Penn Farm Girl says the fickle fingers of fate for the hands that were over the buildings there.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. Look at Penn
Farm Girl. Steve Betts says I have to mute the TV when the teeth chatter. I hate the sound.
Yeah, don't do that. I hate it too. I really dislike that a lot.
I just had to throw that in.
We want to, yeah, because Dennis doesn't want anybody to watch the show anymore. Thanks, bud.
Come on, it was just only a couple of bites. That's all it was. There you go.
Don't do it again. I'm gonna mute
Alexander Sandu says, I don't have problems understanding Terry Gilliam, no matter how weird he guess. Lynch's artistic expression, on the other hand, requires advanced analysis.
Alexander, you are so correct. Speaking of that, this is a great time to plug. Thank you for that opportunity. I have made contact with the center of the earth,
the mothership,
Dictor von Doomcock. I have made contact with Dictor von Doomcock, and we will be covering a show that might involve somebody we were just talking about. We got to see we got to work on the scheduling. I will keep you updated, but we have made contact. And it's going to happen, and we got to thank Viking Bitch for that. So
yeah. Apple Crow says we don't need every X-Men, we just need every multiple man. That's another joke that
there you go. Penn Farmer part Cenobite, Dennis. The Cenobites, he got kicked out of the union. He wasn't paying his dues.
I tried taking over, and they didn't like that.
Yeah.
Steve Betts says it's the wooden popsicle effect.
What's the wooden popsicle effect? Do I have to look that up? Oh, okay. Yes. I'm sorry.
When people bite down the wood, they don't like it. You know, that weird spongy feeling.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So, yeah, I get the same feeling when somebody rakes a fork across a dinner plate or, of course, fingers on chocolate. But, okay, I got you now.
Yeah, same kind of thing. Yeah. So that's the end of the chat there.
There we go. End of the chat. Great episode, everybody.
Yeah. Awesome episode.
And like a lot of you will be seeing this when this rolls over into a video. Again, if this is the first time you're seeing us, if you can, join us in the chat live. We try to get on within 15 minutes to a half an hour off the East Coast airtime. So you West Coasters are going to have to watch it on a video. But a lot of you West Coasters are seeing it on the East Coast time anyway. If you got cable, you get to see it early. Yeah. So and the reason we do that is because we have to work tomorrow, so we can't stay up too late. Next week's episode might be a little later. So we might be on at like 9 next week. I apologize for that, but I'm going to be working a little late. Tomorrow night, The Expanse premieres. Just going to leave it there. The Expanse.
What's The Expanse?
It's this really good show. And also tomorrow night, I got to make an announcement that Krypton is going to be our last one till the finale. We're gonna review the next Krypton, and then we had to make a decision. I didn't really want to do a doubleheader on Wednesday night, stay up super late before I go to work. And Krypton's, quite frankly, the interest in it has kind of waned. So that's got everything to do with it. But we will return to it. Or if like something like if Hawkman shows up in an episode or something, we'll run on and do it. And we'll communicate that with you on Twitter. And that's the best place to find out. We have nerdrotic.com is where we have our schedule. We do schedule these. We're pretty much on time on this stuff. So we schedule all of our recaps. So if you want to see what we're covering, if you want to suggest something, go ahead and suggest it in the comics or email me. You can also follow me on Twitter at Nerdrotics. Dennis is at Deforce, DAFORCE. And a lot of the happenings of what's going on with the channel go on there. And we have a wonderful community that we interact with on the Facebook group that Dennis runs, and it's fantastic. It's the just go to the Nerdrotic podcast on Facebook and like it and become part of the group. It's a lot of fun, man. Yeah. So otherwise, We'll see you tomorrow night. Dennis, any final words on Legion?
I want to thank some Patreons, right?
Uh,
Or
yeah. I don't have the graphic, Dennis.
okay,
So
never mind.
we'll have to do that tomorrow. We'll thank patrons.
Well,
We love you and thank you, but I have to make a
yes.
new graphic.
So I'll thank everyone who's here in the chat. Alexandra Sandu, Penn Farm Girl, Steve Betts, How's Your Father, Apple Crow, Zev Bellringer. And I know I saw Jody in here. Yes, Jody's there. Sylvia Love. And I believe that is everybody. Thank you all for joining us tonight. That was great. And I'm going to answer a few questions here, or one question actually. Alexander Sandu says, at Nerdrotic Channel, is certain ghost returning to the is a certain ghost returning to the Expanse this season?
Yes. I think at the end of that's the ending I've been hinting at. I think there's two major things that happen at the end. If you've read the books, you know what happens at the end of the second book, which is amazing. And I think both amazing things will happen at the end of this season. And I think that's a really good manipulative way for them to get a fourth season. Because I keep hearing the show's on the bubble, and that's impossible. That like there is so much interest in the show. The chatter on Twitter's been nuts. Like people cannot wait. They cannot wait for the show. So I think this Sapphire will be surprised. They'll be surprised.
Sifi?
Sifi. Listen, if they gave, I mean, I loved Happy, but they gave Happy a season 2 on right at about 1 million viewers an episode. Sci-Fi's Expanse going to do better than that.
Yeah. Sure. Well, Happy wasn't for everybody. I know that.
No, and Expanse kind of is. I mean, that's like one of those shows that really is for everybody. So, yes, I believe so. We will talk about that tomorrow. Can't wait. So, you got any more questions in there?
No, that's it. That was it.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you to everybody, and Children of Earth, don't let the door hit your ass on the way out.
Thank you again for watching us recap Legion. We will be back here next week to do the same thing. And may the small folk sing songs of the greatest. And patrons, well, I'll have the graphic ready tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.